Pum, pum. Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. It has been a busy day for me today. Um, so, yes, it has been a very busy day today. I even went and did a mail run today. Zeffy got to open her latest bark box. So, if you want to see that, check out my Facebook page or go to Zeffy B. Zeffy, the letter B is one word, and that's her page, and you can watch the video there. She loves her bark boxes. And I came to sit down to do the live, and I hadn't opened her bark box, and she's gotten to know what her bark boxes are. And so she came and she sat here and just basically told me off that I hadn't opened her bark box, and she wanted to open it. Must be the smells coming from the box, but so we had to delay while we went and did that. But that's okay. It's okay. We're here. We're here and now. So welcome to Before the Nap Dirt. Before the jeepers. See, it's brain's a little fried. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1176. Where today we are talking family history. We're talking Family History Month. We're continuing with that theme, and today we're doing by the numbers. Yeah, by the numbers. Yeah, census reports. Census reports can give us a lot of really cool information based on what country you're in, how often they do the reports. Most places are every 10 years. Here in the States, if the year ends in a 0, it's a census year. In England, if it ends with a 1, it's their census year. So different areas do different census, and the questions that they ask can change every year. So it's so for example, and I got to bring this up because I don't remember all the ins and outs. So in the US here, they've been doing the census since 1790, and you can check up on all those. But 1790 to 1840, the census taker only listed the name of the head of each household and the number of people living in the house, and they divided that into by age groups and by the sex, whether male or female. And that was all the way up to 1840. And 1850 is where they started listing every person in the household and giving information like how old they were, where were they born. And over the years, the questions have changed. So you've got them asking different questions different years based on whatever the census people wanted to know that year, I guess. There might have been something. But what was really cool is that since 1850, they have been putting on there everybody in the household, how old they were, where they were born, and then later on you got into questions like where were their parents born, which helped a little bit as well, because if you saw that, you had this family group that was born here in the States, and on the parents it says, well, this one was born in England and this one was born in Germany, or this one was born in Scotland, or you're sort of like, you've now got another place to go. So you can find a lot of clues on a census report. I love looking at the census reports. I like to see what questions did they ask. And you have to remember too, is that I think it was 1940, I think it was 1940 or 1950, where they actually put a mark next to the person who gave the enumerator the information. And I thought, well, what if the person didn't live in that household? Because when they took the information from the people that in the household, it may not have been a family member giving the information. It may have been a neighbor. It could have been a distant relative who was staying there. It could have been the boarder who lived in the house, or the roommate, or something like that. So you really don't know who gave information. And then on, I think it was either 1940 or 1950, they put a little circle with an X next to it, so you knew who had given the information for the household. So that is why when you're looking through and you come across a family living in a house, and it's the same house that they were in 10 years beforehand, the names are the same, but the ages are out of whack, it's because somebody who didn't really know the family that well, or one of the family members who didn't really know how old people were, gave weird numbers. It's as simple as that. So in 1850, they started listing everybody in the house with place of birth and their age. If you hear any loud roaring, the jets are going for night flights, and they're taking off right now. So I apologize for the loud roars as they go overhead. We're on the direct flight path for Luke Air Force Base, and the They've been flying all day. Now they've got the night flights going. Those planes are getting a workout, I tell you. So, and then every year they changed some of the information. But from 1850 onwards, there was always the name of the people in the house, the names of the people that were in that household, how old they were, where they were born. And then they started adding things in like, are they married or single or widowed? A few years on, they started adding divorce in there as well. And like I said, it just keeps changing. So that's why I like looking at the census, because you never know what questions they're going to ask until you get in there and have a look. They even had, what they even started putting in questions is like, what was your trade? What is your trade? What profession are you? Which helps a lot. And that's what helped me with my third great grandfather in England on the English one, because years later on the census report, it had that he was a bookbinder, but his father was a jeweler. And it's like, well, how did that happen? And then, of course, if you've heard me tell the story before, we found a baptismal record that had him listed on there with his father, who was a jeweler. And directly below that was his half-brother's baptism, the mother who got married to somebody else. So I went back to the census in 1851 and found him on there, and he was a bookbinder. And that's how my third great-grandfather became a bookbinder and not a jeweler. Because in those times, the kids typically went into the same profession that their parents were in. And that's typically what they did. There are exceptions to the rule. There's always exceptions to the rules. And that was one of those ones. And one of my favorite ones, though, I think it's 1910 census for the US, for the federal government. Now, here's another thing. Some states would do their own census, but not necessarily in the same year the federal census was done. They may do it on, like I know New York for a while was doing census on a year that ended in 5. And there's other states out there too that did their own census on different years. So that can help you if you've got people from those areas where they did their own census. That can help you track, so you're not having to wait 10 years or having to look at 10 years to figure out what happened. Because I know in New York, on one of my clients' ones, her grandmother got married after the census was taken, but before the next census, they were already divorced. So there was no chance to see them in a household. But on the census that was done on the years in between and the one that ended in a 5, we were able to see them. We were able to find them as a household before the divorce happened, before they went their separate ways and everything else. So those in-between ones can be very, very useful if you have people that are in that area. They may, and some of them will just ask basic information like name, how old were you? They may even ask the birth date instead, where were you born, and that sort of stuff. So they just have like basic information, but it can help fill some of the gaps. Then later on, they started adding in things like how are you, who is the head of the household? And they'd put the name up there, and next to them they'd have head, and then underneath. And they actually had a particular order they were supposed to go. It was meant to be head of the household, then the spouse, and listed as wife. And they said wife, yes. Then they had the sons and daughters in age order. And then you had other family members, and then you had other people that were like maids, servants, lodgers, other people that were visitors, that sort of thing that were staying there that may not be related, but they were in the house at the time. And on another one, they would put, if you saw an AB next to the name, and I can't remember which year that was. You see an AB next to the name, it means that person lives in the household, but they were absent from the house on that particular night. So you may actually find those type of people on the census twice in 2 different areas. One in the house that they're supposed to be living in, but they could have been away on a business trip. They could have been, off on vacation or whatever. And then you may find them on another census later on as being a boarder or a renter or a roomer or a lodger under some other, or visiting family. They may be listed as the son or daughter of somebody else. But they were there in their parents' house, their cousin's house, their sibling's house on that particular evening. So that is why on some reports you will find a person entered twice. Once because they were absent from the house they usually live at, their normal place of residence, and they were visiting somebody else for whatever reason. So there's that as well. And Then you've got the namings of the children, because some children, and I tell you, they will test you. They test you on these ones. We talked yesterday about some of their abbreviations, like William could be WM. He could also be listed on the census as Billy or Bill. Then you've got John, and instead of being JOHN, depending on the enumerator, it could be listed as Johnny. It could, and their name might change over the years too, because it could be listed as Johnny on one census. You go to another one, and he is listed as John. You go to another one, and it's just got initials there, because that could be the nickname he's known as an adult, instead of John, or it's whatever information the person feels like giving. Like, you remember when they ask for your name, you might, your name might be Michael, but you say, oh, Mike, and then enumerator write down Mike. And it was the 1910 one I like, and here's why I like the 1910 one. The 1910 census asked on there of the women, how many children have you had? How many children have you given birth to? Was one question. The second question was, how many of them are still alive? So when you're looking for a family, it gives you a good indication that, oh, this is a family of 6, but they only have 4 children that are still alive. Okay, now the numbers are starting to add up, or the numbers are still out of whack. I've only got names of 2 children, and there's another 2 out there that were still alive when that census was taken. Now I need to go find what their names were, and they may quite possibly be listed in the census right there in the household. Or it may turn around and say, I've had 6 pregnancies and there's only 4 children alive now. What happened to the other 2? So you start finding all these little clues and things in there, and profession, where they were born. On some census later on, they started asking, where was your mother born? Where was your father born? Which can help you when you're researching, because they could be in a census in, say, New York, but their parents may have been born in Michigan, or one in Michigan and one somewhere else, Wyoming. I don't know, just coming, or a different country. There could be a country in there like Germany or France or Ireland or England or something like that. So that now gives you another place to go and look for the information. And the other thing too is that having that information can help you if you're looking at it and you're going, okay, they say they've got 4 kids, but there's only 2 here. Look at the ages of the 2 that are there. Could it be possible that the other 2 may be older and are already out on their own? They may be married. So let's start looking for them in the census. Let's go back to the one 10 years beforehand and see who was listed in the household 10 years before that. So you start looking, and there's a lot of looking backwards and forwards. There's always a lot of research and things, so you can find the information and start putting the puzzles together. And then you may find them in their own house. And so it's always good to double check by going, okay, on this one here, it says that mum was born in New York and dad was born in France. So now you go over and you think you found the sibling, you have a look, and the mother was born in Wyoming and the dad was born in New York. Well, we now have a mismatch. Why do we have a mismatch? Is it 2 different people? Is there another person on that census who's got the same name? And so then you've got to start, okay, so here's a clue. We've got to go looking for a marriage certificate, because this guy's there with a wife. There's got to be a marriage certificate or registration somewhere, so we need to go looking for that. Oh, by the way, they've got some kids there, so maybe we need to start looking at birth records and things. So it gives you lots of questions and lots of places that you can go and start looking. And also think too, when you see the age, look to see the date that the census was taken, because from 1830 to 1900, the date it was actually from 1830 to 1900, the date was on June 1st, and in a couple of years, it was actually done June 2nd, because June 1st was a Sunday, and they didn't do that on Sundays. And then in 1910, it was moved to April 15th. In 1920, it was moved to January 1st for the 1930 census. In 1910, it moved to April 15th. In 1920, it was January 1st. And in 1930, it changed to April 1 and has been April 1 ever since. So the date the census was taken plays an important part when you're trying to figure out birthdays. If you know they were born in the later half of the year and the census is done in the first half of the year, then they wouldn't have turned whatever age they were supposed to be. So you have to take that into account when you're looking. Some of the census that I have seen also list the month in which they were born. And some of them will also, what age were you on your last birthday? That's a good question. What age were you on your last birthday? Not what age are you today? What age were you on your last birthday? So that can also help narrow things down as well. Things that you've got to be aware of on Census Report is borders change, counties change, towns change names. It could be that one little town merged with a village next door and they became up with a new name. And then you've got county lines which were changing a lot as well. So, they may have been in one county for one census, now they're in a different county. Oh, did they move? No, they're actually still in the same house. It's just that the lines moved. So be aware of that as well. And remember that when territories became states, or new states came on board, like you've got Alaska and Hawaii that came on last. So when did they come on board, and what were they known before they became a state? What were they known as, and things like that. So also look to see when the county was formed, because if you're looking for a particular county and you can't find it, go and see when it was formed. It may not have been formed till after the census was taken. So then what was it beforehand? There are maps that you can go and look at, and you can pull up what was the map like when they did the census as well. So those are just some of the hints and tips for looking at a census report that I tell you, they are fascinating. You can find lots of surprises on there, especially if you're doing the 1910 census and it's got, how many children did you have and how many are still living? That question is like, oh, they got way more children than I thought they had, because you may have only known about 2. I wish they had that on the Irish census at one point as well, because I'm still looking for the rest of the family for my client for the one for Ireland right now, and I'm having fun with that one. I'm hitting some brick walls, so I'm going to start on the wife and see if I can find what information I can find on her, and where I can find information on. But I do know where they were in 1930, because they got married in 1920. Sorry, married in 1920, and they were on the. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's right. They were in Canada. Canada was on the year starting with 1 at that point. So they got married in 1920. 1921 was the first census that they were on as husband and wife. So I did manage to find them, and gleaned a little new information from that as well. But try to find them on census reports before then. They weren't married at the time. They were, and so trying to find the husband has been a challenge. Try to find the wife is a challenge as well, because you don't know when they came to the States. Although on the 1921 census in Canada, it asked what year you immigrated to Canada. And the husband put 1900, questioning that, because it turns out that some of his information may not be correct, even though he is the person giving the information, because he suffered from a head injury from a gunshot wound during World War I. And so we think that may have played with some of the inconsistencies of the information that we have about him. And so that's interesting that we're going in and we're looking at that and doing some more investigation into that. But right now we're going to put him aside for now. We're going to go study the wife and see what we can come up with her. And there may be some clues and information about her that leads us back to information about him that we've been looking for. And we've still got the search going for the sister. We can't find her. I can't find her. I can't find any marriage records for that a person of that name getting married to the person with the last name, married name that she had. I do have the addresses of where she was living in 1916 and 1918. I have the address that her brother was living at in 1916. Those are the years that he joined up with the military. So I have that information there as well. It's a very interesting situation to be in with this particular one that we're researching. We're trying all sorts of different things, different ways, even going to some of the some of the lesser known ways. We may have to do some boots on the ground stuff to get some of the information that we need. But we're doing what we can online right now, since I'm not in in Canada. But anyway, that's it for tonight. What surprises have you found on a census report? I found people living in places I didn't think they were living in, and then it's questioned me, do I have the right family? And started that, and then I've come across one person who I knew was my third great grandfather with his 6 children by his he either had 5 or 6 children with his first wife, who is my third great grandmother. She passed away after either number 5 or number 6. I can't remember how many she had. There was 11 in total. 5 by one woman, 6 by the other. I just can't remember whether it was the first wife that had 5 and the second wife that had 6, or it was the other way around. And so on the census report, I found him, I found her, I found their children. But what was interesting is that there was a couple of names in there I didn't realize. Who are you? I sit there and I talk to the census report. Who are you? What are you doing in this family? Where did you come from? Because I found all the birth records for the husband and the wife and their children's baptisms for all of those. So I found all of those, and it took me a while to make sure they were the right ones, because in in that particular branch of the family, there is a lot. The common names are for men are Thomas, George, John, William, James, and there's another one. Most of them are one of those names: Thomas, George, William, James, and I've already forgotten. Thomas, George, John, James, William, James, Thomas, George, John, James, and William are the most common names. And my maiden name, which is the name I'm looking underneath for all these guys, is about as common as Smith. That's another thing I discovered. I thought it was an unusual surname. Not in England. My parents, their first trip to England, they come back, and what shocked them was the number of times they saw Eakins on billboards all over England. And they said it was as common as Smith. And I said, yeah, I'm finding that in the research too, because I went through 183 John Eakins to find the one that fitted in my tree that was born, and this was born within a 5-year time period in the area. And yeah. And I'm pretty sure, because I wasn't keeping detailed notes on my research log at the time, because I hadn't learned to do research logs at that time. This is like about 20 years ago. That I may have researched the same person twice or 3 times. So, but I went through 183 John Eakins. I kept a count of how many I went through. And so I may have doubled up on some of those. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've doubled up on some of those numbers. But because I wasn't keeping the logs, I don't know if I did for sure. So I did go through 183 of them to find the one that fitted in my tree. That was a 3-year search, and that was a 3-year search, 3 or 4 year searches. Hang on. That was a 4-year search. Doing a little bit here and a little bit there, and sometimes spending an entire day just looking for John Eakins born between these 2 time periods in this particular location, in this particular little town. It wasn't a very big town either, but it was amazing how many Eakins were in that little town and the immediate surrounding area. That was just amazing. So you find out all sorts of things on your family trees as well. Anyway, and when you've got family visiting family, and they started putting in there how you're related to the head of the house, like it would have sister, and sister had a different last name, but there was a guy there with the same. So now you knew who her husband was, so you could pick up information like that. Oh no, look, there's their kids listed as well. So you can find out nice surprises like that where you've got the information, and then you just go find the other documentation that backs all of that up. So anyway, I'm out of here. Go have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we will see you guys back here tomorrow evening. Tomorrow's Thursday. Yes, we'll be able to do 6 p.m. Pacific time-ish. Pacific time-ish. Have a super fantastic sparkling evening. Hei konera.